It all started with an ad that looked too normal to be dangerous. I had just moved to Portland after a rough breakup and a job that drained the life out of me. I didn't have much, just a suitcase, my laptop, and the kind of hope people carry when they're trying to hit reset on their lives. Craigslist wasn't my first choice, but it was the fastest. The listing read, "Room available in quiet Victorian duplex. Month to month. Utilities included. Male roommate. No pets. No parties." There were 4 photos, all clean, well-lit, and bland. Beige walls. Wooden floors. A modest kitchen. And a bedroom with a single bed, a desk, and a small window that faced the street. The guy's name was Eli Martin. Said he was 29 and worked night shifts at a data center. He replied within an hour after I messaged him. His tone was short but polite. We arranged a time the next day to meet. When I showed up, the place looked exactly like the pictures. A little too quiet. No music. No TV. Just the distant hum of passing cars. The house was old, but well kept. The kind of place that creaked when you walked, but still held its shape. There was a scent too, something faint, like lemon cleaner over dust that never really left. Eli opened the door. He was thin, with pale skin and dark circles under his eyes. He had this tired, withdrawn look, but he smiled when he saw me, like he was relieved. "Tyler, right?" I nodded. "Come in." The tour was quick. Living room. Kitchen. Bathroom. My room. Then a hallway that ended at a locked door. "Storage," he said. "I keep some old stuff in there. Just don't want it cluttered." I didn't care. The place was cleaner than most I'd seen, and the price was almost suspiciously fair. I should have paid more attention to the way he watched me, like he was studying how I moved, how I reacted to each room. But I wanted the room to work. I needed it to. So I signed the lease. The first few days were fine. Eli kept to himself. I worked from home, so I barely saw him. Most mornings, I'd hear the front door close softly as he left for his night shift. At night, I'd hear nothing at all. But by the end of that first week, I started noticing things. Small things. A spoon in the sink that I never used. My shampoo slightly moved. My bedroom door creaking open just a little, even though I remembered closing it. At first, I told myself it was just adjustment. Old houses make noises. Maybe I forgot to close the door. Maybe I was being paranoid. But it didn't stop. It got stranger. And then one night, I woke up and thought I heard whispering. Very faint. Like it was coming from down the hall. Or from inside the walls. I held my breath and listened. But the whispering stopped. I told myself it was the wind. Or the pipes. But part of me already knew something wasn't right. And I had just signed a lease with someone I didn't really know at all. The second week started with the door. I woke up one morning to find my bedroom door slightly ajar. Not wide open, just enough to see a sliver of the hallway, where the light from the living room glowed faintly through the cracked curtain. I always shut my door at night. Always. It was a habit, like brushing my teeth. I liked the feeling of being sealed in. I stood there for a while, staring at the gap, waiting for something to move beyond it. Nothing did. Just the stillness of early morning and the soft hum of the refrigerator down the hall. I brushed it off again. Old houses. Drafts. Maybe I didn't latch it all the way. But then it happened again. 2 days later. And this time, I was sure. I remembered the click of the knob turning as I shut it. I even pulled it to test. It stayed shut. But that morning, it was open again. Same angle. Same silence. I asked Eli about it over coffee. He barely looked up from his phone. "You close your door when you sleep?" I nodded. "Must be the wood expanding. Happens in winter sometimes." It was October. I didn't push it. After that, I started noticing more. The kitchen light flickering even though I had just changed the bulb. The hallway floorboards creaking when no one was walking. My laptop mouse moved an inch on my desk. Maybe I bumped it, I told myself. Then came the bathroom. The first time it happened, I was heading in for a shower and the door was locked. I knocked, but no one answered. Eli's car wasn't in the driveway. I called his phone. No response. I waited 5 minutes, then tried the knob again. It was unlocked. Inside, the mirror was foggy. The sink had droplets on it like someone had just washed their hands. But the floor was dry. And the air didn't smell like soap or steam, it smelled faintly like metal. The next night, I woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of water running. I got up, half asleep, and found the bathroom's sink gushing. Eli wasn't home. Again. I shut it off and stood there for a while, listening. Then I noticed the faint sound of footsteps above me. There was no upstairs in our part of the house. The attic was sealed off. I looked up. Silence. I was being watched, but not in the way people think. It wasn't paranoia. It was too specific. Too pointed. Like the air itself was aware of me. I started locking my bedroom door every night. Not just closing it. Locking it. I pushed a chair against it too. It made me feel better, for a little while. But no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't the only one moving things in that house. Something else was there. Something quiet. Something patient. The first time I heard it clearly, I was lying in bed around 2:30 in the morning. My room was dark, the street lamp outside casting thin amber lines across the wall. I was drifting somewhere between sleep and awareness when I heard it. A voice. Soft. Muffled. Whispering. At first, I thought it was a TV. Maybe Eli had come home early and was watching something. But the sound didn't have that rhythm. It wasn't dialogue. It was like someone speaking too low to understand, over and over, right through the wall. I sat up and held my breath. The whispering stopped. I waited. Nothing. I lay back down and stared at the ceiling until my eyes burned. The next morning, Eli was in the kitchen making toast, as if nothing had happened. I tried to bring it up casually. "Did you get home early last night?" He looked at me, chewing slowly. "No. I didn't come home until 5. I nodded and pretended that made sense. But I hadn't heard the door open. And I was still awake past 3. The next night, I heard it again. This time, it was closer. Still unintelligible, still whispering, but now it was in my room. I sat up in the dark, my ears straining. It wasn't coming from the hallway. It was coming from inside my closet. I stared at it. The door was shut, but the whispering was leaking through it like smoke. I got out of bed slowly, heart racing, and crept over to the door. My fingers hesitated on the knob. The whispering stopped the moment I touched it. I flung the door open. Darkness. Just shirts, a few jackets, my duffel bag on the floor. But the air felt wrong. Like it had just been disturbed. Like someone had been standing in there, just seconds ago. The next day, I bought a cheap indoor camera and set it up in my room. Nothing fancy. Just motion-activated recording with night vision. I reviewed the footage every morning, expecting nothing. The first 2 nights were clean. No movement, no sound. Then, on the 3rd night I saw it. At exactly 2:48 a.m., my bedroom door opened, slowly, silently, and Eli stepped inside. He stood in the doorway for about 10 seconds, then walked in farther, toward my bed. He just stood there, over me. Watching. Not moving. For almost 20 minutes. Then he turned and left. Closed the door behind him. I watched the whole thing with my stomach clenched and my hands shaking. I didn't know what disturbed me more, that he was in my room, or that I never woke up. I copied the video to a flash drive and kept it in my pocket all day. That evening, when Eli came home, he acted completely normal. Asked if I wanted anything from the store. Like we were roommates. Like nothing had happened. I smiled, nodded. But I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the whispers. But because now I knew he was coming in long before I ever heard them. After watching the video, I couldn't look at Eli the same way. He still kept to himself. Still slipped out late for work, still came home early in the morning like clockwork. But now every smile he gave me felt staged. Every glance had a weight behind it, like he was measuring something I couldn't see. I thought about confronting him. But what would I say? Hey, I recorded you standing over me while I slept. Why? And what if he denied it? Or worse, didn't? Instead, I started staying up late, pretending to be asleep when he came home, just to make sure he didn't enter my room again. For 3 nights he didn't. I stayed locked in, waiting for footsteps. There were none. But the whispers never stopped. Then one morning, around 4 a.m., I heard something new. Metal. A slow, scraping sound. Not like a knife or a fork, heavier, more deliberate. It was coming from down the hallway. I cracked my door open just enough to peek out. The hallway was dark, but I could make out Eli's silhouette standing in front of the locked door at the end. The storage room. He was kneeling in front of it, doing something with the lock. I could see the glint of tools in his hand. It wasn't just locked with a deadbolt. He had added a second padlock. Heavy duty. New. I watched in silence as he stood up, turned, and disappeared into his room without noticing me. When I got up later that morning, the door looked unchanged. Clean. Normal. Nothing out of place. But now it had 2 locks. That same afternoon, when Eli left for his shift, I tried the doorknob again. Still locked, of course. I bent down and looked underneath, just a faint draft. No light, no sound. But something in me was drawn to it. I needed to know what was inside. That night, I went to a hardware store and bought a lockpick set. I'd never used one before, but I figured I had time to learn. I stayed up watching tutorials, practicing on my closet. My hands shook the first few tries, but eventually, I got the hang of it. 3 nights later, when Eli left at his usual time, I made my move. I waited 10 minutes to make sure he was gone, then stepped into the hallway with the picks in hand. The house was still, the way it always was after midnight. No hums. No creaks. Just breathless quiet. I knelt in front of the door, my fingers working carefully on the padlock. Click. It popped open faster than I expected. The deadbolt was trickier. My palms were sweating, and I could barely see in the dim hallway light. But after nearly 20 minutes of slow, careful motion. Click. I opened the door. And immediately, I was hit by the cold. It wasn't just cool, it was the kind of cold that made your skin crawl, that carried with it the scent of damp earth and something older. Something dead. The room was pitch black. I reached in and flicked the light switch. Nothing. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, revealing a narrow, windowless room filled with boxes, crates, and something else. There was a shape near the far wall, draped under a dirty gray tarp. It was tall. Human-sized. I stood frozen for a second. Then I heard it. A breath. Not mine. Coming from under the tarp. The breath was shallow. Faint. But unmistakable. I backed up a step, flashlight trembling in my grip, casting jagged shadows across the boxes stacked around the room. My instincts screamed to close the door, to lock it again, and pretend I had never come in here. But I couldn't look away from that tarp. It didn't move. I inched closer. The tarp was old, stained in places, and the smell that came from it was something I couldn't place. Mold, sweat, maybe blood. The kind of smell that told you this wasn't just storage. My light traced its edges. Whatever was underneath stood propped up, like it had been placed there carefully. Not lying down. Standing. I reached out and grabbed a corner. My fingers hesitated. Then, in one sharp motion, I pulled it off. Underneath stood a mannequin. Life-sized. Dressed in clothes that looked eerily familiar. My clothes. A shirt I hadn't seen in weeks. Jeans I thought I'd lost in the laundry. Even my sneakers, tied neatly, just like I always did. I staggered back. Behind the mannequin was a wall covered in photographs. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Taped up in messy, overlapping rows, some of them curling at the edges. They were all of me. Sleeping. Working at my desk. Cooking. Showering. Photos from angles I couldn't explain. From inside my room. From above. From places no one should have had access to. And then I saw the dates scribbled under some of them in red marker. Specific times. Some from just a day ago. Some from last night. There were even notes. Breathes faster around 3:15. Talks in sleep. Name Kara? Doesn't lock window on Thursdays. I turned and nearly tripped over a small recorder on the floor. It had a blinking red light. I snatched it up and hit play. It was my voice. Talking in my sleep. Mumbling nonsense. Then silence. Then a whisper. Not mine. A voice, low and raspy, right next to the microphone. He's almost ready. I dropped it. Suddenly, I heard the front door open. Keys jangling. Footsteps. Eli was home early. I turned off the flashlight, heart pounding in my chest so hard I thought it would give me away. I crept back to the door, listening to the steady, deliberate thuds of Eli's boots coming down the hallway. I didn't have time to relock the door. Didn't have time to cover anything up. I slipped out silently and darted into my room, closing the door just as his footsteps reached the other end of the hall. Then I heard it. The door creaking open. A long pause. Then, Tyler? His voice was calm. Even. You went in, didn't you? Another pause. I should have told you. Then silence. Nothing for almost a full minute. Until he said, in a voice too quiet to trust, You're not supposed to see that, yet. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in bed with the chair wedged under the doorknob, holding a kitchen knife I barely knew how to grip. Every creak in the floorboards made my chest tighten. Every whisper of wind outside sounded like footsteps just beyond the wall. Eli didn't say another word after that. I heard him walk back to his room and close the door, but I didn't dare check. He never left again. No sounds of the front door. No car pulling out of the driveway. Morning came like it was dragging its feet. As soon as the sun rose, I stuffed what I could into a duffel bag, my laptop, charger, a few clothes, and I left. I didn't even lock the door behind me. I checked into a cheap motel on the edge of town. It smelled like smoke and mildew, and the air conditioning unit rattled every time it kicked on, but it felt like safety. Like distance. That afternoon, I went to the police. I showed them the video of Eli standing in my room. I told them about the photos, the locked room, the voice recorder. I even offered to take them to the house. They looked uncomfortable. One of them, an older officer named Haskins, took notes, while the younger one leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. He hasn't hurt you? Haskins said, almost like a question. No, I admitted. But it's not normal. He nodded, but I could see it in his eyes, the doubt. The sense that this wasn't urgent. Not yet. We'll do a wellness check, he said. But unless you've been physically harmed or threatened, it's a tricky thing to prove. I left with a sick feeling in my stomach. When I returned to the motel that night, the door to my room was cracked open. I froze. Inside, nothing looked touched. The bed was still messy the way I left it, the window locked, the drawer where I stashed the knife still half open. But on the nightstand was something that hadn't been there before. A single photograph. Of me. Sleeping. In this exact room. I dropped it and backed into the hallway. I couldn't breathe. He had followed me. He had been inside while I was gone. And the worst part? The photo had a note on the back. You left too early. We weren't finished. I changed motels that night. Paid in cash. No ID. But every shadow outside the window felt like him. Every door that shut in the hallway made me flinch. And somewhere deep in my chest I realized the truth. Eli wasn't just watching me. He was waiting. I moved twice more in the same week. Always last minute. Always leaving no trace. I stopped using my phone, paid only in cash, stayed out of sight. But no matter where I went, Eli was never far behind. One night, in a budget motel off Highway 19, I was brushing my teeth with the bathroom door cracked open. The mirror had a streak across it, a smear that looked like it had been wiped by a greasy hand. As I leaned closer to wipe it clean, I noticed something behind me. A shape. It passed quickly, barely a flicker, but it moved across the hallway behind me. I spun around. Nothing. I checked the door, still bolted, chains still secure. I stepped back into the bathroom, heart pounding. My toothbrush hit the sink. Then I saw it. In the mirror, just for a second, the reflection was wrong. It showed me, standing there. And someone else, just behind my shoulder. But when I turned again, the space behind me was empty. I stared into that mirror for almost 10 minutes. My hands started to tremble. I pulled open every drawer, checked under the bed, the closet, the ceiling vent. Nothing. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall, staring at the door, waiting for it to rattle, waiting for footsteps. But it never came. Not that night. The next morning, I checked out and drove. No destination, just away. I passed gas stations, cheap diners, fields that seemed to go on forever. At a rest stop near the state line, I parked and tried to breathe. That's when I saw it. Another photo. Tucked under my windshield wiper. It was a close-up of my face. Taken from outside the car window. While I was sleeping in the driver's seat the night before. There was no note on the back this time. Just a smear of what looked like dirt. Or ash. I drove until I couldn't anymore. Pulled off into a small town I didn't know the name of, found a library with public computers, and logged into an email I hadn't touched in weeks. There was a message waiting for me. No subject line. No sender. Just one sentence. You can't run from what's already inside you. I stared at it for a long time. My vision blurred, hands cold on the keyboard. I thought I'd been followed. I thought I was being hunted. But what if it wasn't just Eli? What if something else had slipped into my life, through him? Through the door? Through the whispers? And what if it hadn't left when I did? The library was nearly empty. Just an elderly man reading the classifieds and a teenage girl watching videos with earbuds in. I kept glancing over my shoulder, certain I'd see Eli's face in the window. But no one came. I stayed on the computer for hours, digging. I searched Eli's name. His job. His rental history. Anything. But nothing came up. No social profiles. No public records. It was like he didn't exist before moving into that house. Then I remembered something from the photos taped on the wall in that hidden room. A few had tiny watermarks in the corner, something I hadn't noticed before. WHSBRC004. WHSBRC016. All the same prefix. I copied it and searched online. After a few dead ends, I stumbled on an old archived forum from years ago. Most of the posts were nonsense, ghost stories, urban legends, conspiracy theories, but one thread caught my eye. The Whisper Records Project, Government Experiments in Controlled Surveillance Housing. It sounded fake. Paranoid. But the post was disturbingly detailed. According to the author, the Whisper Project was an abandoned military initiative from the 1990s. The goal was to study long-term psychological effects of constant, covert observation on unaware test subjects. They claimed houses were fitted with hidden cameras, sound traps, even infrared microphones buried in the walls. The most disturbing part. The author listed a handful of known test properties. One of them matched the address of the house I had shared with Eli. I clicked on their username. Deactivated. But the final post they made before disappearing was one sentence. Once you hear them at night, it's already too late. I leaned back in my chair, suddenly aware of the silence around me. That's when I noticed something strange in my peripheral vision. The computer's webcam light. It was on. I hadn't turned it on. I reached for it, but before I could even move, the screen flickered. For a moment, just half a second, the browser window was replaced by something else. A black screen. With 2 white words in the center. Still watching. Then it blinked back to normal. No warning. No glitch message. Just gone. I yanked the power cable out of the wall. The monitor went black. I stood up, heart racing, and quickly walked out the front doors into the daylight. And as I stepped outside, I saw a man across the street, leaning against a lamppost, wearing a plain black hoodie. Jeans. His face was turned away. But his stance, it was familiar. Exactly like Eli's. He didn't move. Didn't look at me. Just waited. I didn't stay to find out why. I made a choice that night. Not out of courage, it was desperation. I drove back to the house. Not to confront Eli, not exactly, but to understand. To find out what had really happened inside those walls. What he had left behind. I arrived just after 2 a.m. The neighborhood was asleep. Every window dark, every front yard still. The porch light was off. His car was gone. I stepped out of mine and approached slowly, half expecting to hear a voice behind me or feel someone's breath on my neck. But nothing came. The door was locked. I still had my old key. When I slipped it in, it turned like no time had passed at all. Inside, the air was thick and stale. Dust hung in the light from my phone like tiny floating insects. The silence felt intentional, like the house was holding its breath. I went straight for the locked room. The lock had been broken, the door hung slightly ajar. Inside, the mannequin was gone. The wall of photographs had been ripped clean. Only bits of torn tape and discoloration remained. But the room wasn't empty. In the center sat a small, square device, a portable hard drive, humming faintly. A post-it note sat on top. "Tyler, you wanted answers. Don't say I didn't give them to you." My hands shook as I picked it up and plugged it into my laptop. The folders were numbered. No names. Just days, times, minute-by-minute logs. Recordings. Clips. Still images. All of me. Years' worth. From places I didn't know I had ever been watched. My childhood home, old apartments, even what looked like security camera footage from the high school library where I studied late in senior year. This wasn't just Eli. This wasn't just now. This had been going on for a long time. Then I found a folder labeled Phase 2. Inside were videos I didn't recognize. I wasn't in them. But the people were like me. Living alone. Young. Isolated. All in different cities. All with roommates who looked slightly off. The same patterns. Same voices in the background. Same mannequins. The same notes scribbled on walls. One clip made my blood run cold. A woman was sitting in her living room, watching TV. Behind her, her roommate entered the frame, tall, still, emotionless. He stood in the hallway for nearly 2 full minutes without her noticing. Then slowly, he turned toward the camera. And smiled. Not at her. At me. The video cut off. My ears were ringing. I felt like I was going to be sick. And then I heard it. A low crackle. Coming from the bedroom. I turned toward the door. And that's when I realized something was wrong. I hadn't brought my phone in there. The sound was coming from inside the walls. Like a whisper. The whispering grew louder. At first, it was soft, barely audible, like the house was breathing secrets just beneath the surface. I pressed my ear against the cold wall. The words were broken. Garbled. But every now and then, a clear phrase cut through. "Don't trust, outside, too late, inside." I pulled back, heart pounding. The room felt colder now, like the air itself had weight. My eyes darted around, searching for the source. Then I noticed something on the floor. A small crack had formed near the baseboard. I knelt down and peered inside. Behind the drywall, hidden in the narrow space, was a thin wire, like a microphone cable, snaking along the floor and disappearing into the wall. I traced it back with trembling fingers. It led to a tiny hole, barely the size of a coin. Through the hole, I could see a dark, narrow crawlspace. The faintest light flickered inside. My mind screamed at me to run. But I had come this far. I grabbed a flashlight from the floor and crawled through the hole. The space was cramped and smelled of damp earth. I followed the wire, inching forward. Suddenly I heard movement ahead. A shuffle. Breathing. And then a voice, cold and low. "You shouldn't be here." I froze. The flashlight beam caught a figure standing in the shadows. Tall, thin. Face obscured by darkness. He stepped forward. Eli. But not the Eli I thought I knew. His eyes were empty. His smile stretched too wide. And in his hands he held another mannequin, this one wearing my face. Eli's smile didn't reach his eyes. He tilted his head slightly, like a predator studying its prey. "Do you see now?" he whispered. I wanted to run, but the crawl space was too tight. My breath hitched, chest tightening. He stepped closer, holding the mannequin in front of him like a trophy. The face was eerily detailed, every freckle, every scar, every line mirrored me perfectly. "This isn't just about watching," Eli said. "It's about becoming. Becoming someone else. Someone better." I swallowed hard. "Why me?" I asked. His eyes gleamed with something I couldn't place. Obsession? Madness? Both? "Because you were chosen," he said. "You were always part of it. Part of the experiment. The Whisper Records. But it's more than a project now. It's a legacy." I shook my head, panic rising. "You're insane." "No," he said, voice cold. "I'm free." He moved the mannequin's head and then slowly, with deliberate care, began peeling away the silicone mask that covered its face. Underneath was a hollow shell. No eyes. No mouth. Just empty space. "I'm just a collector," Eli said. "The ones who come before me are different." The whispers returned, louder now, echoing through the crawl space. They weren't just voices in the wall. They were warnings. I had to get out. But as I turned to crawl back, the wire snapped. Darkness swallowed me. And Eli's voice echoed behind me one last time. "You belong to us now." The darkness was complete. My flashlight had died when the wire snapped, leaving me blind and gasping for air in the narrow crawlspace. Panic surged through me as I scrambled backward, fingers scraping against rough wood and cold concrete. The whispers filled the space, rising into an unintelligible roar that drowned out my heartbeat. I hit a dead end, a solid wall, and froze. I was trapped. Then, out of the shadows, I felt movement. Cold fingers brushing my arm. A breath against my neck. A voice, barely a whisper, but clear. "You can't escape. Not now." I scrambled desperately, searching for any gap, any crack, any way out. My fingers found a rusty grate. I pulled with all my strength. It creaked and gave way just enough for me to squeeze through. I emerged into the basement, coughing and covered in dust. The basement was filled with boxes, old equipment, tapes, files, all labeled with codes matching the Whisper records. I could hear footsteps overhead. Eli. I had no idea how long I had been trapped. But I knew one thing. He was still watching. Still waiting. Still planning. And I wasn't the only one. In the basement, I found an old filing cabinet with a thick layer of dust. I pulled open the drawers and uncovered folders marked with dates spanning decades. Inside were files on dozens of people, names crossed out, notes scribbled, and photographs of strangers in everyday moments, unaware they were being watched. One folder had my name. The papers described an experiment called the Whisper Project, a government attempt to study human behavior under extreme surveillance and psychological pressure. Eli wasn't just my roommate. He was a living record keeper. A twisted guardian of secrets no one was supposed to know. Suddenly, a voice crackled behind me. "Curiosity is dangerous, Tyler." I spun around. Eli stood at the staircase, his face calm, but his eyes dark and unreadable. "Now you know why you can never leave," he said. I backed away slowly. The house creaked, the walls seeming to close in. I realized the project wasn't over. It was just beginning. I didn't answer. I didn't move. I just stared. Eli's figure seemed to dissolve into the shadows as he whispered, "Some doors close forever when opened." I ran. Upstairs, through the kitchen, past the empty living room. Outside, the cold night air hit my face like a slap. I didn't look back. But before I got into my car, I saw it on the porch step. A note. Written in shaky handwriting. "You can never leave. You're part of this now." I threw the note into the street and started the engine. As I drove away, the headlights caught movement in the rearview mirror. A figure standing at the doorway. Watching. Waiting. And somewhere deep inside, I knew the nightmare was far from over. Weeks passed. I moved again. Different city. New apartment. I tried to erase Eli from my mind. But the feeling stayed. Every shadow, every noise felt like someone else was there. One night I heard footsteps. Slow. Methodical. Outside my bedroom door. I froze. No one should be home. The door creaked open. Empty hallway. But on the floor, a small, folded piece of paper. I opened it. 3 words. "I'm still here." And that was when I realized. Some roommates never leave.